What's up? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. If it's your first time here, I'd encourage you to look around. I have a lot of experience in the streets and going to prison, and so that's reflected in some of the content. But I've also worked for many years to help reduce violence in the community from a community perspective. I've done legal work, helped people fight cases, beat cases. I've been all around the country, man, and so that's also reflected in some of the content. I got interviews with great people. We do talk about prison, talk about legal stuff, relationships, current events to some degree. And so go ahead, check out the playlist, look around, and if there's content that you like, I'd encourage you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the little bell for notifications so you can see when I post new stuff, and join the Homie Hangout. And so anyways, for this conversation, Wack 100, Wack 100, and Tres. I saw the conversation that happened. For those who don't know, very briefly, Wack 100 said that he would not sign a Southsider. There was an exchange between him and Tres. I think anybody watching would agree that Wack 100 was exaggerated in his response and was the aggressive one. I think anybody would agree that Tres was more mature and reserved, but also, strive to make his point. That's not me picking one side over the other. All the comments that I've seen, from Black folks and from brown folks reflect that. And so I've listened to, like I said, different people's feedback, and I've hesitated to get involved, but I think there's room for a bigger conversation here that I don't see a lot of folks touching on. And so I'm not going to get into dissing Wack or his background. I don't really know anything about him except he's a producer. I never heard of Threads before this, so I suppose, to some degree, it's probably good publicity for him. I've checked out some of his music since, and he's got some bars, right? The thumbnail is actually a screenshot from a video that he did, and there's another Southsider on there too, and I think he's from Florencia, but I could be wrong. And he's got bars, and the Black dude got bars. So everybody's a rapper, and they all got some degree of talent, and so. There's been plenty said, about Wack 100. I don't know what's true. I don't know what's not. Frankly, I don't really care. Like I said, I want to kind of expand the conversation a bit. And a few things were touched on in the exchange that I think are kind of troubling or maybe deserve some clarity. It's a whole thing, Southsiders and Blacks, and then comparing, Southern Mexicans with Northern California Mexicans and how they engage. And then to some degree, it seemed like it was just a Black and Mexican conversation. And there was folks from other states, Black folks from other states chiming in on what relationships with Mexicans in their communities look like. Like I said, there was a brother from Northern California that says, hey, we mess with Norteños and not Sureños, which I think instigates, a little bit. And there's a mention of the end of hostilities when Thresh is talking about hunger strikes and it's a new day. And so I said, let's unpack a little bit of that briefly, because I think there's some stuff there that's being missed. But first of all, it's never a good idea to invoke, prison politics and that kind of stuff in a conversation like that. I think most would agree. I would caution anybody against speaking on what the next man's big homies are going to do or what the next man's people are going to respond to them. When that's not your group segment and that's not your people. That's making some assumptions that one can make you look not very credible and potentially can get you in some trouble and also can kind of get the other person in trouble. It's just ugly all the way around and it's not productive. I would also caution against trying to school folks from another group on how things are when clearly they're not seeing it the same way and that's not your people. In the sense of, race or geography or prison stuff, you're kind of wasting your time and you're creating more of a conflict, right? If they're not operating on the same page that you're aware of, then just keep it pushing and keep operating, according to what you fall up under and let them deal with their own people. And it might be different. So the idea, this end of hostilities is great. I did a video about it, some time back, so feel free to check it out. I'll click to it up there somewhere. But it has created space for conversations between groups that have been in conflict in California. And that's beautiful, in my opinion. And it's created some changes in the dynamics in prison in terms of yards and how people are operating and who they're operating with. And I think overall, that's a good thing. And it has made some changes in the streets in some places, but I would caution it, even in Northern California, if you're a Northerner, I wouldn't go to 19th and Mission looking for papusos with a Niners jersey or go ride through Richmond flamed up talking about hunger strikes, right? Because you're still gonna get approached. If you're a Southsider, I wouldn't go to the McDonald's on 24th and Mission with a Dodgers hat on and expect everything's gonna be fine if you mention prison politics. It's not that universal, right? Folks are still in the streets and folks are still getting down how to get down. Hell, you got Northerners fighting Northerners, and that's been outlawed from a prison politics perspective for longer than a lot of those folks in the conflict have even claimed to be Northerners. And so there's not always that clear of a line. And some groups have a closer relationship with people in prison than others. And that's true for neighborhoods, that's true for races. And so that's a factor. And that's why I said don't try to push another group segment on adopting what you know to be true. It's it will be a failed effort. So it's cool to put people up on game, but if they're not receiving it, keep it pushing, right? And so there is some work down south too, man, in terms of like the Southwest Collective in Southwest Los Angeles, where you got Black and brown folks, doing Machina together, and you have lines of communication between neighborhoods that have killed one another, right? Between Black and brown neighborhoods that got bodies between them, and they're talking, and that talking is creating some level of progress. And the degree to which that progress is happening with each specific neighborhood, I can't speak to that, right? I'm not from LA, I'm from up north. But I do know that changes are happening. I do know that in San Diego, Black and brown conflict is reduced, right? I don't want to say it's gone away, but it's reduced. And I know a Southsider down there that's a legit Southsider, right? And a legit blood down there, an Africano who's a blood, and they're very good friends, and they're both very well-respected people. And so that's good. Communication is good. Progress is good in that arena, but it's not universal. And especially out here on the streets, so be careful with that. The other thing is this racial dynamic. And personally, I don't appreciate somebody from another group segment stepping in and talking about, I mess with Northerners, I don't mess with Southerners, right? Everybody's entitled to get down how to get down. You're entitled to mess with whoever you want to mess with. But that's like me, back when there was historic conversations happening between the Bloods and the Crips, right? And the whole banging on Wack came out and all this other stuff. If I was to come on a platform and if I had a platform, which it seems Black 100 does to a degree, and I was to say, hey, I only mess with one group, I don't mess with the other. Well, that's not helpful when these two groups are talking to each other. And so I would caution, the brother from the Bay, and it's not my place to tell anybody what to do, but I would encourage people to not feed into that division at a time when there's an effort to help kind of heal and repair some of that division where it's possible. And Northern California stuff looks different, right? And there's a couple of reasons for that. In Southern California, South Central LA was a mecca for the Black community, right? There was a big migration from the South, United States over here to get away from Jim Crow, and South Central was a middle class, thriving Black community for a very long time, and was a fixture in the civil rights movement. King was down there preaching. All the artists, all the wealthy Black folks came through South Central LA. And South Central was created by LA County and by, frankly, white folks in leadership in LA County who didn't want Black people in their area. And so they made sure they all stayed there. And the response was the building of a beautiful community. East Palo Alto is another similar example in Northern California. That was a vibrant, thriving Black community, right? And was a couple votes away from being called New Nairobi or Nairobi in the 80s when it incorporated. And so the Fillmore in San Francisco, right, was a famous Black jazz community. and just thriving class. And then the 80s came, right? And crack hit and the economy and Reaganomics and all this other stuff. And a lot of hoods got destroyed and became hoods, right? So, and they were predominantly black. Those were predominantly black neighborhoods. And now most of those neighborhoods are predominantly brown. Except for those that have been fully gentrified and they're predominantly white and Asian. And I'm not saying this to stoke any racial conflict with anybody, so please don't take it that way. And everything I say should have the asterisk of not all, right? So not all black people, not all brown people, not all white people. That's a given, a race of people can't put in, you can't put them in a box. So there's a particular history down in LA, right? And then Raza comes, right? And Latinos come moving in and they weren't taking houses and taking businesses. They were taking advantage of vacancies because the people that had the money to get out of those places when it became the hood, they left. And that is reasonable. And so you just had this whole redistricting thing with District 2 down in LA County, where they redistrict every 10 years and kind of set it up so that you can have elected representatives that represent, certain communities and voting power and whatnot. And there was this big fear that they were going to lose the black vote if they redistrict, District 2 in certain ways. And it's this historic community that covers Compton, other parts of LA County. And the majority of the voting public there is brown, right? It's Latinos. And that's true for just about everywhere in LA County. And so you got a lot of black folks that push back against that. And this has nothing to do with gangs, right? This ain't hood shit. This ain't gangs. This ain't turf people. This is grandmas, that are pushing back because they're losing something. And brown folks are not to blame for them losing it. But that's the whole oppression Olympics, right? Of who's been done worse. Is we were slaves in this country, we came and we built this, right? And that's true, that's a tragic history, right? And then you got brown folks saying, well, this was our land first, right? The state stole this land from us, this is our land, and all these different things, views come into play. And I've used this analogy before, but too often it's like, you have a baker that's got loaves and loaves and loaves of bread inside their bakery. And there's people lined up outside, man, that are starving. And so they come outside with a loaf or two and they say, this is all we got today. And so everybody's fighting and scrapping for those crumbs from those 2 loaves. And they're fighting each other. But in reality, they could get together, kick down the door to the damn bakery and everybody get what they need. But we're not quite there yet. I think we're getting closer, but we're not quite there. And so instead you have 2 marginalized groups, 2 beautiful groups of people that have a long history in this country and have contributed to the building of this country and have rich culture and history and everything, that are competing for limited resources, so they're competing with each other, right? There's only so much to get and you're asking for it and I'm asking for it. And so I need to quiet your voice to make sure mine's heard. I need to make clear why I need that more than you do, right? And so you got brown folks running around that sound like white supremacists when they talk about black people. I got folks in my family, I have friends that sound that way. And you got black folks that are carrying on with white supremacist narratives of, Mexicans taking all the jobs and all this other stuff. So there's a long racial tension. And LA is in some ways kind of unique because of how the politics, the community, the government, the systemic politics have played out down there in redlining and building freeways and marking off people and that sort of thing. That has happened in Northern California, but it looked different up here, right? A lot of communities were black and brown communities. And so there's a history of kind of coming up together. But don't think that the racial tensions up here are gone. Like this whole thing of Southern Mexicans hate blacks and Northern Mexicans love blacks and we rock with them and everything's all great. No, that's not exactly how it is. It is more like that on a hood level than it is in Southern California. But again, man, you go to the Valley, Raza in the Valley, a lot of them racist as hell, they ain't mess with no black people, right? It's in the urban pockets, right? San Francisco, Oakland, that kind of stuff, it looks a little bit different. But as the brown community rises and the black community shrinks, you're seeing those same racial tensions kick up. In East Palo Alto, you had a squad of folks running around, young Africanos that was blasting at Mexicans just because they were Mexican. But East Palo Alto was historically a black community that when I moved out of there, 80% brown, right? And so it is happening all over. It happens for different reasons. It is not simply prison politics. In prison, is there a history of Northerners and Blacks, rocking with each other to some degree, and Southerners and whites rocking with each other to some degree? Yes, and that dates back to the 60s, and there's different reasons for that I'm not all going to get into now, but also don't think that's exclusive, right? Northerners and Blacks have gotten off in prison. Southerners and whites have gotten off in prison. I've seen it all when I was in there. And now on the yards, you have everybody, for the most part, coexisting in the general population yards, right? Which are shrinking because you got all these integrated yards and that kind of stuff. So that's a whole nother conversation. I actually addressed that in a video a little bit as well. But so there are two different things, and muddying the waters with all this stuff is not helpful, right? We can't act like there is not a long, hundreds of years history of colorism, if you want to call it that, in the Latino community, in the Spanish-speaking community, in the Mexican community, of darker skinned folks being looked down on and lighter skinned folks being elevated, right? You don't see a lot of dark skinned folks when you put on Telemundo, Univision, and everything else, right? All the novelas, no, and that's intentional, and that's a product of colonialism, frankly, and goes back a long time. So I'm not going to try to break all that down now, but let's not act like one group is. It seems like in some of the comments, in some of the videos, and some of the comments, there's a lot of kind of self-righteousness maybe that's coming up, right? Of who's the better and who's the worse, and I would caution against that, because no group has operated without sin in these situations, so to speak. I don't mean that on a religious level. It says ain't nobody blameless, right? And there was an effort in videos to make it sound like, Mexicans down south just woke up one day because their big homies told them to go kill all the Black people, and then, that's why now Black folks are hesitant because Mexicans are racist. Let's not act like the violence has been one way, right? And that doesn't excuse one side or the other, and I'm not picking one side or the other. I am for Raza not beefing with each other, absolutely, but that doesn't mean I'm for Raza beefing with Blacks. I'm for Blacks not beefing with each other too, even though I'm not Black. So there's a bigger thing here, right? But sometimes people will take advantage of an isolated situation, which is what this is, and try to use it to justify a bigger agenda, right? And so there's some conversation about, see, Black people are hating to see brown people come up, right? And I don't think that's a fair reaction to Wack 100's commentary. Are there a lot of Black folks that think like him? Yes, there are, right? Are there a lot of Raza that wouldn't want to be signed to a Black? You couldn't pay them enough to be signed to a Black label. Yes, there are, right? You got a lot of Black folks turn around like, oh, look at, the Raza Mexicans are trying to take over our culture. This is our thing, right? And the thing what happens is when you don't have much and you've been oppressed and you've been kind of pushed down and kicked to the side, you tend to try to hold on to whatever you have. And that's not unique to Black people. Brown folks do it too. And so that impedes conversation, right? I get where Thrace was coming from. I get his point. His point makes sense of, hey, we could do business together. Would you be willing to come to the table and do business? Because times are changing and conversations are opening. And that doesn't mean everybody can do business with everybody, but it does mean we can do better than we've done in the past. And to just get shot down in a sense of, nah, I'm with a broad stroke, I ain't messing with none of y'all. And then to make it a Black and brown thing, I think is problematic to say the least. But let's not use this to fuel tension and make this a race issue, right? Racial conflict plays a role in how this dialogue between Wack and Thrace happened. regional stuff plays a role in how this dialogue between Wack and Tres happened. But it is not a reflection of all historical stuff or a reflection of just that region. And we need to do better. Nobody has to sign anybody. There's this dude, Hoodie from the Hood, and I wasn't aware of his channel before I subscribed. Now I'll link to his video at the end of this. He has a real quick, like 8-minute, 9-minute commentary on this. He's a black dude from San Diego, and I think he's a Crip, but I could be wrong. So if I am, I apologize. I'd encourage folks to go check out his view. Man, it's pretty level-headed, right, from a black perspective. And I don't feel like folks need to get on here and jump on and distance themselves from Wack, right? I'm seeing some black folks hop on like, man, he don't speak for everybody. It's foolish if you try to hold black people accountable for what Wack 100 said, just like if you try to hold Mexicans accountable for the shady stuff that SPM did. Like, you can't. This is not. That's how conflict happens, man. Right? And people are responsible for their commentary and their actions. And if they say they're speaking for their hood, then yeah, hold their hood accountable, right? But otherwise, folks are speaking as individuals and should be held accountable for what they say, but it shouldn't go further than that. Anyways, I think a little bit too much has been made of this, and I understand why, because of the historical stuff that I just mentioned, and because there's money involved. So, and because, Wack is a public figure to some degree, and Tres is rapping, he's becoming a public figure. And so I get why this has gotten attention, but let's take a deep breath, right? And progress is being made. It was not reflected in that exchange between those two. They were on two different levels, clearly, coming at it from two different perspectives, clearly. But there's people that, like I said, that feel like Wack feels, and there's people that feel like Tres feels, and there's Mexicans who feel like Wack feels, but on the other end, right? And there's black folks that feel like Tres feels, but from their perspective. So it is what it is. I hope cooler heads prevail in this, and that we don't make a bigger deal, but rather just understand how this exchange can happen. And if anything, let it be a catalyst for more conversation, not a catalyst for more division. Let this be a chance for folks to be able to get at each other in a respectful way and in a building way, rather than shrink back into their own corners, right? And get hyper defensive. Wack is not a threat to brown folks, right? Brown folks rapping is not a threat to black people's legacy in hip hop. It's not that serious, right? It's not that serious. But it could be made more serious. And I don't mean the disrespect should be taken lightly, but again, let's view it for the situation that it is. And rather than focus on that, let's focus on how we got here historically, and that is by the system. The system did this. The system created these divisions. The system has fueled these divisions. The opposition is the system, is not one another, And that's a message for both sides, for all sides. Poor white folks, indigenous folks, polys, like there's, immigrants of other areas. The system creates these tensions. And the system is where we should put our energy in challenging rather than each other. So anyways, that's my 2 cents. I felt like it was a catalyst for some other thoughts that haven't necessarily been expressed. And I appreciate you for taking the time and listening. Again, I'll link to those videos, like I said, and thank you for joining the Hangout, man. Be a homie, help others move in excellence, help others at the same time, help yourself at the same time. Take care.